Every era convinces itself that it has finally cracked the code of money, not merely refined it or patched its weaknesses, but solved it in some definitive, almost final way. And this belief is always delivered with confidence, backed by elegant charts, new terminology, and theories that promise to neutralize risk, flatten cycles, and transform uncertainty into something measurable, controllable, and respectable. Yet history remains patient, because beneath every new instrument, faster exchange, and smarter framework lies the one variable that never evolves at the same pace: human behavior. And human behavior is astonishingly faithful to its favorite illusions, especially the most dangerous phrase ever uttered in finance: "This time is different." Words that have echoed before more collapses than miscalculation ever has, spoken by traders in canal-lined Amsterdam, financiers in roaring New York, technologists in late 1990s Silicon Valley, and policymakers armed with credentials but short on doubt, each time sincerely convinced, each time ending the same way. Which is why this is not a tale about one bubble or one crisis, but about a deeper rhythm, a quiet recurrence explaining why the same economic mirages resurface century after century, even as societies become wealthier, more educated, and more technologically advanced. Because markets are not rational machines, but emotional mirrors, reflecting fear, optimism, greed, denial, and hope all at once. And when enough people cling to the same reassuring narrative, belief solidifies into consensus, and illusion becomes structure. Look across the long sweep of time and the pattern reveals itself. Tulip bulbs in the 1630s, radio stocks in the 1920s, conglomerates in the 1960s, dot-coms in the 1990s, housing in the early 2000s. Different assets, different centuries, identical logic. Where skepticism is dismissed as ignorance and rising prices become proof of truth. Because what actually changes is not the illusion, but its costume. As each generation dresses optimism in the most advanced language it has, whether empire, industry, financial engineering, or algorithms, while the sophistication increases and the vulnerability stays the same, since illusions survive not by being obviously false, but by being emotionally useful, especially the ancient belief in endless growth, the idea that progress becomes a law of nature rather than an outcome of discipline, leading societies to treat slowdowns as glitches, corrections as overreactions, and limits as obsolete thinking, until growth falters, and instead of questioning the belief itself, systems stretch, credit expands, rules loosen, and risk is pushed forward in time, deferring pain rather than removing it, deepening the illusion into infrastructure. Alongside this grows the comforting assumption that complexity equals safety, that slicing, modeling, insuring, and dispersing risk makes it vanish, when in reality complexity merely hides it, delays its visibility, and dissolves responsibility into process, creating the powerful illusion that someone, somewhere, is in control. A belief so calming that societies lean on central banks, regulators, and experts, less because they are infallible, and more because confidence itself keeps the system moving, even though control is usually reactive, fragmented, and constrained by incentives misaligned with long-term stability, causing costs to shift rather than disappear through debt, inflation, and bailouts, each reinforcing the fantasy that consequences can be postponed indefinitely, despite history's consistent verdict that costs always surface and rarely land evenly, leaving some enriched, some ruined, and entire generations inheriting burdens they never chose, making the most dangerous phase of any cycle not collapse but confidence, the moment people believe risk has been mastered and warnings are obsolete. Because history repeats not out of malice, but because psychology lags behind innovation, allowing illusion to thrive in the gap, especially once a system becomes familiar enough to feel natural, and questioning it sounds like heresy, leading societies to learn the wrong lesson from crises by building safeguards that later feel like obstacles as memory fades faster than structures decay, while new participants who never felt the last failure dismiss old warnings as myths, allowing illusion to quietly reclaim territory, which is why cycles require not stupidity but amnesia, as the human mind struggles with long timelines of abstract risk and responds instead to what is rewarded now, mistaking durability for permanence, even in a world where information moves instantly and capital flows freely while instincts remain unchanged. Confusing price with value, complexity with intelligence, and data with wisdom, until confidence replaces caution. Systems collapse not because nobody understood them, but because enough people understood them just enough to exploit incentives while assuming someone else managed the downside, reframing consequences as unforeseeable shocks rather than visible patterns. And this is where history becomes practical rather than academic, not as a tool to predict the next crisis, which is itself another illusion, but as a mirror revealing how easily resilience is traded for comfort, how stability erodes skepticism, and how postponing risk always carries a price, reminding us that real financial freedom is rooted not in prediction or clever timing, but in recognizing where illusions live, understanding that incentives shape outcomes more than intentions, that complexity often conceals fragility, and that humility is the rarest and most valuable asset of all, because no era is immune, no structure permanent, and no intelligence sufficient to override human nature, as history waits patiently for confidence to rebuild before collecting its due. And those who suffer most are rarely the naive, but those who believed the illusion had finally been defeated. A reminder, as another year closes, that progress does not erase patterns but disguises them, and the past is never behind us. It is beneath us, quietly supporting the ground on which we stand.